Hi, everyone. Welcome. Barbara, Julie, welcome. My name is Jenny, and I am from the ASC Science Center. This morning or this afternoon, we have McIntyre Felton presenting today for our Autism Awareness Month. Hi, Barbara. Just a little bit of background on Mr. Felton. He's a mental health professional for the last 10 years, working with a diverse range of individuals. Half of the time he's been working in the clinical setting, and for the last 5 years, he's spent taking or with direct care with children with autism. He's presently running a mental health company with a heavy focus on advocacy, awareness, and education. And today he's going to be discussing a little bit about how we can improve effective communication and increase our ability to empathize and see the perspective from an autistic point of view. And I am going to share his slides. And please feel free to ask any questions as he presents.
Thank you so much, Jenny. So I just want to start off with a quick story. So at a young age, I realized that I kind of thought a little bit different than other people. I was raised by two incredible parents who were extremely outgoing. I watched them maintain normal relationships with people, hanging out with friends, able to hold full conversations. And to me, they seemed like the ideal picture of what normal human interaction was supposed to look like. And as time went on, I realized that that was something that was really difficult for me to mimic. You know, they had taught me right from wrong. They had taught me how to treat people, all the basics, and gave me the framework for the behaviors that I was supposed to mimic. But there just seemed to be the missing emotional connection. So then I began to study mental health in middle school, and I started to focus on body language, and then I started to use movies and films to understand cues and different conversational pieces that I was really missing out on. And you know, this became really frustrating, you know, throughout my high school years, because it just didn't seem like I knew what to do still and how to maintain and grow my friendships. So I began working in the mental health field when I was about 17 years old, working with individuals with ASD. And I'm honestly not really sure if I did it to help others or help myself, but both happened. So I guess that was a success. And as time went on, I realized that, you know, if you can't empathize, or if you can't put yourself in somebody else's shoes utilizing perspective, then there is so much you are missing out on. And it is not like you have to be able to absolutely understand what it is like to be in somebody else's shoes. It's just, you have to be mindful. And so this presentation is really about mindful communication. And there are two key tools that I believe are essential to mindfulness communication. We can go to the next one. So I believe if we work toward understanding the unique experiences and challenges faced by individuals with ASD, we can provide more effective support and build stronger relationships. This is also true for the relationships that we have in our everyday lives with neurotypical individuals or individuals without ASD. And I believe, like I said earlier, the key to this success is through the use of two crucial tools: empathy, and perspective. Good. So, what is perspective? So, perspective is an individual's unique view of reality based off of their unique experiences and how these events have affected them, whether that be consciously or subconsciously. Now, I like to see this, or what I think about perspective is it is a specific set of glasses or lenses that are personally tailored based off of everything that has occurred in our lives. And this determines how we react and respond to everyday life situations or the extremely stressful situations that can be perceived as traumatic or unusual, that when we go into the automatic, almost reflex responses, that our perspective is a big piece of determining how we are going to respond. We go to the next one. So I broke down 4 of the main factors that are very important aspects of our perspective. So emotionally, we have things that were traumatic to us, things we fear, our mental status, whether we have, anxiety, depression, ASD, any type of mental characteristic that makes us slightly less neurotypical. And especially any mistakes or successes, because those create such an extreme emotional imprint. It's like, oh, we know when you make a big mistake, that is something that you usually never forget. And when you succeed, that's, a very long lasting memory, depending on how major the success is. So then next from emotionally, so now we're going outside of the body, we've got the immediate household. So it's going to be parents, close relatives. It's going to be, your roommates. These are going to be people that you live with. And they say that the people that you live with have a very, very big influence on your perspective, the way you see the world. And many people have said, you are the sum of the 5 people that you are the closest with, and that ends up being mostly the people in your household. Then we've got close proximity. So these are the people that you usually see on a daily basis. So this would be school. So people that, if you go to school, your schoolmates, teachers, you got your friends, your external family that lives outside your household, and then you've got your coworkers. And then in the environment, so these are influences that affect either your town, city, country, and especially now with social media and television and the news, we're pretty keyed into everything that is going on. Gonna go to the next one. So really something very important to ask yourself is, why does perspective matter? It may be something you haven't thought about up till this point when dealing with interactions, but our view on the world determines everything. Perspective is one of the main factors that is responsible for how we interact with others, how we perceive them, how we respond and interact with our environment. So one of my examples is that, let's just say you have 2 people, they're both in a relationship. Now, both of their significant others have started coming home later than normal. They are seemingly being more secretive, not showing their phones to you as often, or it seems like they are putting an extra effort to hide the screen of their phone. Now, one person may perceive this as my significant other is cheating. And the other person may perceive this as, oh, they may be surprising me with something. Now, depending on what has happened into our lives, what experiences that we've gone through, this is going to heavily influence the way that we are perceiving this information, because one lens is positive, thinking that they're about hiding something, maybe they don't want you to see, the mail, your mail, email, if there's going to be a delivery confirmation or whatever receipt for the gift that they bought, or it's the other way in the negative perspective that they're being sneaky and hiding things. Next. So these are other similar things that are related to the factors, and it's kind of just more general. But when we're considering communicating with others, we have to remember that they are going to have different experiences than our own. And even if they have same experiences, the way that they perceive those experiences and the way that they react to those experiences are completely different. Connections means the way that our brains draw conclusions and makes decisions, inferences, and all of that. So just like the example I gave earlier, it is the utilization of experiences that cause those connections to be drawn, where you're either positively viewing a situation or negatively viewing a situation, or maybe you feel no way about a certain situation. Triggers relates to the traumas and fears, and sometimes naturally already occurring responses that happen to events or negative situations. And then, of course, we have our preferences. Now, preferences, likes, dislikes, loves, hates, these are the things that we usually tend to define ourselves by as an individual. But after you say, oh, like, what's your job? And then it's, what do you like to do? Because that's a real big piece of us that defines who we are as an individual, is what we love, what we dislike. My significant other always says, I'm a very picky eater. I don't like any food, but I love it all. But all right, next, please. So if you watched the previous seminar yesterday, she did an amazing job talking about autism. So I'm not going to go too deep into as much information as her. Mine is more about the tools that we can use to interact positively. So I'll just go with the definition. As autism is defined as a neurodevelopmental condition of variable severity with lifelong effects that can be recognized from early childhood, chiefly characterized by difficulties with social interaction and communication, by restricted or repetitive patterns of thought or behavior. Next. So with all that definition, what does that even mean? So as previously stated, individuals with ASD have a unique perspective on the world in relation to neurotypical individuals. This perspective may appear as heightened sensitivities to stimulus. So that means that when specific feelings, so stimulus is based off of the five senses, and some senses are going to be more sensitive to extreme stimuli, or even specific stimuli that is not considered extreme to other neurotypical individuals. So many individuals with autism need support tools that are physically comfortable for them. So, certain rough objects may bother them, or the tag on the back of their shirt. To you or I, that may be a nuisance, but to them, it can invoke an emotional response because it can be a trigger. So instead, we have to be mindful and accommodating for any of these possible sensitivities. A big thing is a difficulty expressing their emotions, feelings, and thoughts. Now, this is essential because this is a big part of social interaction, is having the ability to express how you feel and what you're thinking. And if that can't be done, then this is where you'll see some people either shutting down or throwing a tantrum, or what we perceive as a tantrum, but really it is just frustration, because as human beings, what we want out of this world is to be able to express our feelings and emotions and have somebody else be caring and accommodating for them. So if there's a communication gap or barrier, then it is almost like an extremely hopeless feeling, because they're not being heard. And the most important things that we can share with somebody else, especially the ones that we care about, is how we're feeling. The interesting thing about individuals with ASD is, like I talked about earlier on how our brains draw connections, that they draw connections in a different manner than many people. And with some of them, it is almost like a superpower, because you'll have someone who does chess for the first time and is beating somebody that's been playing chess for years and years and years. Their brain is just able to solve problems in a different manner than many neurotypical individuals. And the last part is difficulties discerning and understanding common neurotypical social behaviors. So this can appear as being socially awkward. This is like my story in the beginning about myself, is I had an issue discerning common neurotypical social behaviors. And it took me time to be able to study and figure out how to best interact with people in my surroundings, because the way I was going, if I did not spend time on learning this, that I wouldn't have positive relationships in my life that I would be able to maintain. So for them, it is a lot more difficult for these normal social situations, especially with things like sarcasm. People with ASD are frequently known to be more literal. So they take words at face value for the most part. So these are just some things that we really need to be mindful when communicating. Next. So same factors, different perspective. So they have an absolutely different view of the world than most of us. Their brains will draw different connections, like I said earlier. And like we touched on, there's going to be different triggers and sensitivities, which may be a little bit more extreme than others, or maybe there is none at all. But usually those sensitivities, again, are related to, and triggers are related to, the inability to communicate, the oversensitivities to specific stimuli. And if you may know someone with ASD, you may know that their likes, dislikes, loves, hates, preferences, they can also be very extreme on the spectrum as well. Whereas many neurotypical individuals will partake in activities that they do not favor. It doesn't mean that they hate, but does not mean that they love it. Where individuals with ASD really tend to lean towards their specific things that they love. So my brother, he has ASD. He loves football. He loves football stats. He loves baseball. He loves baseball stats. But there are also some things that he will not and does not want to do, whether that be something that possibly triggers one of his sensitivities, or it is just something that he doesn't understand, so he does not want to partake in it at all. Next. So the tying point for all of this, so the other side of the coin is empathy. So what is empathy? So it is the ability and willingness to step outside of your experience and bias to try to understand the life and situation of somebody else. So like I had stated earlier, I was missing this emotional connection. And a lot of times, some people think that to be an empathetic human being, you need to be able to put yourselves in the shoes of somebody else emotionally. And that may be difficult, especially when somebody is experiencing something that you do not understand, you've never experienced. And so we need to look at the data of the information. So that is one of the biggest keys that I learned is treat every interaction like you are collecting data and use that data to then decide how am I going to respond accordingly. So mindful communication. Next. So when it seems difficult to be able to understand someone with ASD, just remember empathy. The success of all relationships is based off of this principle, and you keep this in mind when interacting with anyone. If you empathize, you can effectively connect. And like I had just said, it's not about being able to feel the emotions that somebody else is feeling, but just understand the situation as if it is being, I see, read to you in a story or played in a movie. How would you respond if you were that character in the movie? How do you feel if you were that character in the story? If we can put ourselves in the shoes of somebody else who is experiencing something that we don't understand, then we can start bridging the gap and having way more effective communication. And also, one of the most important pieces is showing that other individual that we care about them. You know, if we have the experiences, connections, and trigger sensitivities and preferences that are different than an individual with ASD, that doesn't mean that we cannot connect. That just means that we need to be more mindful, we need to listen, and we also need to use our eyes as well. And if we don't rush, if we don't try to, push, and we give them the time to communicate in their own specific manner, because there are some individuals who are nonverbal. So how do you interact with somebody who is nonverbal? You have to use visual cues. You have to use tools. And we've just added a page to our website where there's a big list explaining all the tools and what they're used for. But we just need to be, like I said earlier multiple times, is mindful, And I think nowadays mindfulness has really made a big hit in society, dealing with either meditation or just finding a way to calm your thoughts. Well, mindfulness is also just an increased awareness on your surroundings and the individuals that you're dealing with. All right, next page. So what really matters is, what does each human want? So peace. What is peace? So peace, in my mind, is the reduction of stressful and emotionally draining and upsetting experiences. Love. We all want love. And love just doesn't mean having a relationship, because some people in this world really don't care for that. But love is just having a group or a few people around you who care about you, who are supportive of you, and they're mindful of your needs and your feelings. And of course, happiness. Everybody wants to be happy. We want to be able to pursue the things that we enjoy. We do not want to just be forced to do the things that do not make us happy, that do not, bring joy to us, do not bring fulfillment to us. And of course, to be treated as an equal. And just because someone has autism, it does not make them less equal. It does not make them less capable. It does not make them less intelligent. It just means that their lens of the world is different. And instead of trying to force them to interact as if their lens was the same as everybody else's, we need to be mindful and accommodating to see their point of view. And we're just all unique human beings with different perspectives. We are all unique individuals. Next. So lastly, I have one of my favorite stories, possibly considered a parable, but it really focuses heavily on perspective. So it's the blind men and the elephant. So there were 6 blind men, and they walked upon an elephant, and each of them were trying to discern, well, what is this? So each of them reached their hands out to touch a different part of the elephant, and this was their experience. So the first blind man put out his hand, touched the side of the elephant. He says, "How smooth. This is like a wall." The second blind man put his hand out and touched the trunk of the elephant. "How round. This must be a snake." The third blind man put his hand out and touched the tusk of the elephant. And he says, "How sharp. It must be a spear." The fourth blind man put his hand out and touched the leg of the elephant. "How tall. It must be a tree." The fifth man reached out and touched the ear of the elephant. He said, "How wide. It must be a fan." And the sixth put his hand out and touched the tail. He said, "How thin. This must be a rope." Now, the original moral of this was that these men ended up fighting about what they believed it was. Each of them believed that their perspective was correct, whether this is a wall, this is a tree, this is a spear, this is a snake, this is a rope. But really, they were all right and wrong at the same time. And the original lesson is, you don't fight someone else's perspective, because as we know, because we see the whole picture, technically they're all wrong, but technically they're all on the right path, because they're describing what they're perceiving based off of their perspective. So they are getting the qualities and the physical traits of it dead on, but just missing what it actually is. And how I really saw this story is that every single one of us have one piece of the world. All we have is exactly what we've been through, what we've experienced, and it's what we know. That's how we go through the world, is carrying the story and the lenses based off of everything that has happened to us and all that we know. And instead of going through the world believing that our individual perspective is just enough to live a happy and fulfilled life, that couldn't be further from the truth. We truly need to be able to open up and be willing to see and understand other people's perspectives, because that can essentially change our lives and make a big difference in other people's lives. And that is it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Are there any questions? Feel free to unmute your mic. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh.
McIntyre.
Yes.
You told us to give them time, to give those people time to articulate what they want to say.
Yes.
All of us lose patience.
Yes.
How much time should we give before we kind of like help to nudge them along?
So, everybody is unique. But the thing is if you got to watch, because, sometimes I'll get lost in thought, or I'll be trying to comprehend something, and, it'll take me a while, the wheels will be turning, especially on concepts that I don't really fully understand. But a big piece of success in the communication is if you are asking something or explaining something and expecting a response, the response really needs to be simple and not slow, as in you're talking down to somebody or you're believing that like, oh, they're not able to comprehend, when that's further from the case. It is just that from their lens, they have to draw different connections than the connections that we're making in our heads that lead us to make these statements. So if first, it really does start with the initial prompt that we make. I've worked with many people who are extremely intelligent, but they perform the best when I give them a clear, concise statement with few to little steps, and we go step by step so that it gives their brain time to process. And, they have to rewire some stuff to be able to, draw the same conclusions or similar conclusions that we make. So it's really just about the individual that you're interacting with, because some people are easier to be frustrated if it seems like they're being rushed. But yeah, I think it really depends. And we have to really watch the body language and possible social, like the cues, to see like, are they getting it, or do I need to rephrase it? And then you can always just ask like, oh, I can rephrase that in a different way if you would like. It's really like, the more you know someone, the better it is. It makes it a lot easier to determine how long before, all right, I need to give a different prompt. I need to ask if they need clarification. Yeah, I hope that helped a little.
Are there prompts we should look for to be able to say, okay, we need to step back and be more pointed in our question?
I tend to ask, when I'm working with one of my clients, I tend to ask, I'll give them, let's just say I gave them a prompt that was an instruction to do something, and I'll give them a few seconds, it could be 10, 15 seconds. And then I will go, would you like me to explain in a different way? Are you understanding the instructions? Sometimes can come off as a little rude, depending on who you're working with or interacting with. But for all my guys, they don't mind. So if I'm like, oh, do you understand? I can explain it in a different way. And then I'll also say like, oh, sometimes I can, I kind of put the blame then on myself and say, oh, sometimes I can be unclear with my explanations. And it kind of relieves that pressure off of them, thinking that, it's a processing issue with them, or they're, not intelligent for not understanding. Whereas it could just be we're having a communication gap, because sometimes it is like speaking a different language. When we are talking to someone with ASD, because our lenses are so different, I could be explaining a concept that they've never experienced, they don't completely comprehend, and then it could be the same thing with them. They could be explaining something to me, and I'm like, oh wow, I never really thought of that way. So really, it's just not letting those frustrations show, and that's probably one of the hardest things to do, is because frustration and anger can be a very easy thing to pick up for a lot of people. Even how I had mentioned earlier that individuals with ASD do have commonly some troubles with social cues. Sometimes they can end up hyper focusing on your big changes in tone, facial expression, because if it's obvious, they're noticing like, oh, there was a shift, and that shift just happened like right after, whatever event. And sometimes they can either feel responsible or like they did something. Yeah. Any other questions? Oh.
I actually have a quick question. First of all, thank you for this presentation. It's been wonderful. I have a 10-year-old, almost 11-year-old who's high functioning autistic, so I know. And so basically my question is, are there any resources that you can point us to that might help educators, specifically, K through 12, or I'm in the composition in the English rhetoric department here at PG, and I'm hoping to help our faculty as well with adult learners who are part of the ASD community. So if there's anything that you can provide, that would be amazing.
Yeah, so we've been working on myself and some of these other fantastic Purdue staff have been working on an online resource. I know I don't have, I may have the link, I'm not sure, but I know that Melissa, Jenny does. Yeah, and I'm definitely planning on working towards adding to the resource on common things that we can do in specific social settings to make it easier to be more accommodating. And I know there are a few YouTube channels out there too that I'll make sure that we can get on the resource as well. Because I do love that, because it can make all the difference in somebody's learning if the teachers have those tools and can be, more mindful and understanding of like, oh, what should I do if this happens? What should I do if that happens? So that is a great question. And we'll definitely share the link with you. And we're going to be updating the resource as time goes on as well to make it, as helpful as possible.
Awesome. And one more thing, I'm hoping that the answer will be yes. I'm hoping that at some point I can reach out to you or anyone else who's involved in this particular initiative, because I'm working on my PhD, and I want my dissertation to be in my PhD is in technical communication and rhetoric. I want to focus on how we can incorporate elements of perspective and empathy and ABA philosophies into how we communicate in a written fashion with all students, because personally, I feel that having learned a lot from ABA watching my son, I think that everybody should get a little bit to help us. But I'm just at the beginning of this process, so I'm definitely all about trying to find resources and just people who will point their finger in a direction they should head.
But yeah, you can. I'll definitely share my my email and contact information. That's where I've actually been working the past couple of years now as an ABA, and trying to get my hours in for my BCBA. So to be a board certified behavior analyst. So that's, my current path right now that I'm working on top of, my few clients that I have and my business. But I would love to be able to assist with anything that you need. It is really important. Yeah. That's why a big portion of my seminar was that this is tools that we can use with interacting with everybody. We just need to be mindful of those extra sensitivities that individuals with ASD might have and their different, wiring of their brains that make them quite unique compared to most neurotypical individuals. But really, if we just carry these tools when communicating with anybody, that's what's given me success throughout my whole life. In my, interactions with people was just all of these tools that I listed, just being mindful in my communication and really, applying to ABA, applying those practices in everyday life with everybody. And it works, rarely do I have people angry and yelling at me. I tend to be frequently mindful, I make mistakes occasionally, but it works with everybody. Yeah, absolutely.
So Barbara, Jenny and I have both put up a few sites. We put up our site that we have created for Autism Awareness and Acceptance Month. We have McIntyre's site up, and I also put up one to help you to talk to some individuals who can help you with your research as well. And
Thank you so much.
Foundation. And the person there you'd want to talk to is Dr. Lazat.
Are there any other questions? Well, thank you so much, McIntyre, for a wonderful presentation. I learned a lot. I think next seminar webinar we'll have on epigenetics and the effects of nutrition and food on autism, if you'd like to join us. Thank you again so much for presenting today, and have a great day, everyone.
Thank you for having me. Thank you, everybody.